Welcome to Breaking Par with Bernard Sheridan, the golf podcast that interviews the best and brightest minds in the golf industry. Now, here's your host, Bernard Sheridan.
Darin, welcome to Breaking Par. Thanks so much for being with us today.
Hey, thanks for having us, Bernard. I've been looking forward to doing this for a really long time.
Yeah, so I mean, it's pretty cool that we finally our schedules actually meshed and we were able to do it. So your thing is fitness, and that's what we're here to talk about today. But the first question that we always like to ask everybody who comes on the show is, when's the very first time that you ever picked up a golf club?
I was 9 years old. My dad had just picked up the game with a friend, and I wanted to kind of join the party. So I was 9 when I first picked up a club. I'm 28 now, so I've got some experience under my belt, and I'm thankful for that.
So when did the aha moment come when you said, maybe I'd like to do something involved with golf in some way as a career?
It was in high school, actually, because I grew up in Western Pennsylvania, and I was looking at the golf management programs. So I looked at Penn State, I looked at Coastal Carolina, and then I had a friend who lived down here in Fort Myers, and he went to Florida Gulf Coast University at FGCU, and they had a program there as well. So I decided to pursue that path and started working in the golf club industry. I hadn't had any really prior experience. I just loved playing the game. So I got into the golf industry when I first came down for college, working at Imperial Golf Club down here in Naples. And I was there through college, and kind of during that time I transitioned into athletic training, physical therapy, but still wanted to remain in the golf industry if I could. So the Titleist Performance Institute was a natural connection for me, because it really brought the two together and allowed me to do what I love, but also still be surrounded by people who love golf just as much as I do.
Now, was fitness a big part of your life, but before you went into college, or was it something that became a bigger part of your life once you started that?
I grew up playing sports. I mean, I pretty much played everything. So in that sense, fitness was a big part of my life. I wasn't really like a gym rat in high school. I grew up playing ice hockey, so we had a little bit of an introduction when I was maybe 13, 14. We weren't doing a lot of like heavy lifting or really any stretching for that matter. It was, looking back, we were really behind the times. But when I got into college, I started working out a lot more. I did an internship with the Hurricane Junior Golf Tour, and our apartment was right down the street from like a 24/7 gym. And that's when I really started working out a lot more, started learning more. That was right before my transition into athletic training too. So it's kind of all tied together there for me. And that's when I really started doing more and more with fitness and performance.
Now, what do you find, because you work with a lot of upper echelon players, you also work with a lot of players who are amateurs, and or just the everyday golfer. So sometimes some of those individuals they need different types of things for your service. So what do you find are some of the biggest differences between the amateur player and a professional, and how you approach what they're doing, and how you give them certain things to do to enhance their performance?
It's funny because you think you're working with a professional that they're just going to have really no big issues to work with. So I mean, even working with some PGA Tour players and guys that have played events on the greatest stage, they've all got things going on that are very similar to your average country club member, junior, beginner, whether it's a man or a woman. I would say that the one thing that professionals do really well with is maintaining mobility. They tend to have a bit more mobility than the amateur player. So whether it's maybe just understanding of how their bodies work on a deeper level, I think adds to that athletic ability. And I would also say that a lot of amateurs maybe didn't grow up playing a lot of other sports. I find that a lot. So they get into their 50s, or maybe they take a 20-year break during their work life and don't really do a whole lot. So I think it's important to kind of maintain that as you're going throughout your work life, and try to somehow find a balance, whether it's with your kids or just on a little bit of spare time.
I think it's like that use it or lose it type thing. I mean, you would think that the bulk of professionals are people who are doing that for a living. They're using it all the time. They're stretching all the time. They're active. They're playing constantly. So they're going to have a lot better mobility because they're actually using those muscles all the time, as opposed to some of these other people who maybe are sitting behind a desk a lot and are getting out maybe once a week for an hour to practice, and then they're going and playing on the weekend.
Sure. So the needs are definitely different, and then the goals are obviously different as well. With the professionals relying on their play to really dictate their career and their livelihood. So I would say that they're a bit more committed to that, but although they are still playing a lot, that does create a lot of muscle imbalances for players. For example, most right-handed players will have a large muscle imbalance if they're playing a lot on the right side of their spine. Those muscles get rather hypertrophied, where the left side doesn't as much, because we're rotating left all the time, every swing we take, essentially. So the only way to offset that is to swing as many times left-handed as you're swinging right-handed, which we know isn't really a thing that we find a lot of players do. So you have to get into the gym to get rid of those muscle imbalances. Maybe not get rid of them, but try to push it back in the other direction to where we're a bit more equal, and left is closer to right.
Yeah, I find that I rarely see anyone swinging in the opposite direction to try to balance that out. I just actually was watching a YouTube video yesterday that was a live video from the event, and one of the I don't actually remember the exact tour player that the gentleman was showing, but what I did see was, as he was warming up, he was swinging right-handed and then swinging left-handed, and I want to say I was kind of surprised at that, because the majority of the players that I see, they don't do that, and I think that they should. I know that when they do that super speed training to build speed with the super speed sticks and things like that, they're swinging in both directions. So that constant balance of muscle left to right, both sides, is important. So give us a little bit deeper insight into why that is so important.
So if we have a muscle imbalance on the right side of the spine, as opposed to the left, as we're rotating into the downswing, that right side is contracting very quickly, while the left is stretching out. So that contraction on the right side we call concentric. That's going to rotate us to the left. Meanwhile, those left muscles right along the spine, they kind of stagger up from level to level. Those are stretching out, and they have to go through an eccentric contraction. So it's kind of like the braking system. Right is the gas pedal, left is the brake. So if we have a really powerful acceleration of the right side, we better have really good brakes to slow it down. If we relate it to baseball, most pitching injuries occur on the follow through. So the rotator cuff in that instance maybe isn't strong enough to slow down the acceleration of the arm. The golfer really goes through those same type of forces. So it's imperative that we have enough braking power on the left side to be able to slow down properly.
So, out of the things that you have players do you believe that for the average player that stretching is a lot more important than it is strengthening, conditioning?
Yeah, it's a combination of both. Because you can stretch as much as you want, but if you don't have control of that range of motion, then it's basically useless. So I'll always combine stretching with some type of exercise just to get the brain involved. So we do have some stability at each joint, and we're able to control the range of motion that we do have at every joint that we're really targeting. So a lot of players, I always take players through a 3-step process. So it's function, which is where we would stretch, go through body weight exercises. Then we start to introduce the strengthening, the speed. You mentioned the super speed protocol. We don't introduce that immediately, although most players want to gain speed. The best way to do that is to make sure that we're functioning properly first before we even start to add resistance in the strength phase, and then further on top of that, add any type of speed. We don't want to layer on speed on top of dysfunctional segment, because that really just pushes us more towards an injury than it does higher performance. I think that's one of the biggest pitfalls of the golf fitness movement now is we're just trying to become stronger without kind of ignoring the function part of it.
Right. So of course, I would think that the biggest thing in fitness, not just in golf, but in fitness in general, for all sports, would be to create a solid balance of the body, and so that the player can perform at their best, to strengthen the muscles, so that they can prevent injury, and to keep those suppleness in the muscles again, so it prevents so it'll prevent injuries. So the bulk of the players that you're dealing with across the board, what are the steps that you put them through when they come to you? I'm sure that there's a screening process that you go through.
Sure.
To find out, what's working, what's not working. Give us a general idea. Let's say if one of our listeners were to come to work with you, what they could expect.
Yeah, so our assessment is pretty in depth. So we'll go through roughly maybe 90 minutes or more. Most of the time it's more, so it's pretty intensive. We'll get them swinging on our 3D system. We use K-Vest. So we're looking at how fast things are rotating, how much they're bending, side bending, how much they are rotating, just so we have a number and we know exactly how things are moving at the time. And then we'll go through a full orthopedic assessment, making sure that we're looking at the health history. Maybe there's a history of low back pain. Well, what's that being caused by? Is it arthritis? Is it muscle imbalance? Is it some degenerative changes that we need to maybe address and potentially refer out? Those are always kind of in the back of my mind. And then we go through a functional movement screen, which is done at NFL combines, other professional sport combines, things like that. Looking at how well the player can stabilize and move in different positions. Next, we would go through more golf-specific moves. So how well can they separate and stabilize For example, how well can I rotate my upper body while my lower body stays quiet? And then also the shoulder, looking at how much rotation we've got at the glenohumeral joint, and then look at how they can stabilize that in the golf swing, how much range of motion they have in that golf posture. Beyond that, it's kind of pinpointing what's tight, what's weak, how does that affecting the golf swing, and if we do change it, is it going to lead to a performance gain, or is that maybe something that's beneficial for the player, especially a professional player? You always want to really double check your evaluation. I think that's a really important part, because what makes some players great is that they're built the way they are and they move a certain way. So you don't always, I don't think, want to change that aspect of their movement unless it's really off from a movement standpoint, and it would be concerning for injury down the road.
Now, do you find that the bulk of the players that you see that come to you or are referred to you are due to their recovering from an injury, or they're kind of half and half, where you have some that are just like, hey, I really want to get into some type of a golf fitness program because I really want to up my game, or I'm here because I got hurt and I'm starting to play golf again, and I've heard some good things about you, and I think that I want to give it a try.
Yeah, I think we've kind of positioned ourselves at Par4Fitness as a sports medicine performance, and kind of like a almost post rehab type facility where players can go through a hip replacement with their surgeon, go through physical therapy at that clinic, and then come to us with a really solid plan of, okay, how do we go from rehab to golf course? Because there's always a window there that players are kind of in limbo. They don't know what to do. So we try to fill that void. But I would say it's a lot of players too, just wanting to hit the ball further. They want to reduce any flare-ups of pain. So it's mitigating those injuries that inevitably pop up with everyone. Just because you're training, it doesn't mean that you're going to be injury-free, but we want to try to maybe reduce those injuries that do pop up and make sure they don't turn into something major that would take them away from the golf course or from tournament play.
Sure. So are some of the things that you're working on similar to what, let's say, myself would work on as a golf instructor, and sequencing and kinematic sequence and things of that nature?
Yeah, there's a lot of like running, throwing, and kicking are some of the best things that you can do for total coordination. So we'll do things like medicine ball tosses. That's not really a bulk of our training. I would say it's mainly just getting comfortable with how the body's moving and how it should move and what it feels like to move properly, and then relaying that into, okay, how does that go into my golf swing? So we want to make people comfortable with moving better in the gym and at home. So when they get out on the golf course, they really don't have to work too hard to achieve those positions that you would be working on with your student. So we really just try to make the golf instructor's life easier, because, okay, we know we've got movement or better motion at certain segments, and a player can do X, Y, and Z, but maybe not A and B. So it gives us a checklist of things that we can potentially do and avenues that you can take them.
Now, some of the players that you see, do they get you in touch with their instructors so that you guys are kind of like on the same page and know where they are and what they're doing, what their goals are, and then fitness-wise, what you can do to help them achieve those goals?
Yes, that's always part of the evaluation process. If they aren't referred to me from an instructor that I know, I'll make sure that I try to reach out. So that way we can really try to form a team around that player. So we try to give that tour type experience to every player where, okay, we've got Darin in my fitness and rehab corner, and Bernard in my swing corner, and then maybe a psychologist if we're looking at that side of things. That way they're surrounded by people who are really only interested in the benefit of helping that player play better, but also feel better.
Sure, sure. So are the bulk of the players that you're working with right now, are they the average player, or, who are you seeing the most of?
I would say in the summer it's more juniors and my professionals that stick in town. If they're not down on the Latino tour or up in Canada, there's a lot going on right now. So we're getting into like local qualifying and for U.S. Open, Section 1 qualifying, things like that. And then we're ramping up for the start of the Canadian tour coming up, and then we're kind of in the middle of the Latino tour. So there's a lot going on, and then I'll travel out to some clubs and help out the country club members. Usually my average client is maybe around 60 years old. I'd say that's the bulk of the players that we work with, but they're not so different than from the juniors or the professionals too.
Sure.
We start them all off in the same place.
Now, do you find that's due to the demographic of the geographic location that you're located?
Yeah, I think Naples is definitely a hub for that. And it's definitely seasonal, so we're getting more full-time retirees, and we'll also work with more pros that are so busy during the season from October to now, essentially, that are maybe getting into the PGA tournaments, whether it's the pro or pro assistant tournaments, and trying to help them play and move a little bit better too. Because as you know, in the golf industry, we don't get to play as much golf as we'd sometimes like.
Absolutely. Probably play a lot less golf than we've ever played in our entire lives once we're in the industry. Just for a fact that we're so busy in the industry that we don't have the time to do it. And I think also that we're so concerned more about helping our players that we're not really too worried about working on our own game, because we're too busy worried about what we're doing for others.
Yeah, absolutely. So I have to get as much of a workout as I can in during sessions, because during season I don't always get a chance to get an hour or even 30 minutes to myself before I go home.
Do you find that you're getting a little bit of that in when you're demonstrating things to students?
Yeah, I would say so. And I have people ask me, like, how do you play well when you get into the summer months, because you don't get to play that much during the winter. And I definitely think demonstrating, for me it's all day, how to move and the motions that we need to do in the golf swing. I think that really helps carry over to and keep me fresh when I do pick up the clubs again and get to play more. I can perform like I want to, and I'm not knocking off the rust.
Yeah, I think a lot of it too is, at least what I found is that it's a lot like riding a bike. As long as you do it occasionally, you really don't forget how to do it. If you don't do it at all, I don't want to say you forget how to do it, but your performance level drops tremendously.
Sure.
Just because you're not using those muscles that you normally use all the time. It's just as important for I guess professionals to work on the fitness side and things like that for themselves, so that when they do go to play, that they're not like trying to start all over again almost.
Sure.
Which is what happens to a lot of our students when we don't see them for a while.
Yeah, exactly. So you never know what they're practicing and doing if you're not seeing them on a regular basis. I was going to add, like, after the age of 30, 35, we really start to lose some of our muscle mass, especially if we're not challenging ourselves and stressing ourselves and eating properly, then we will start to get slower. We will start to have degenerative changes. And if you don't pick up a club in 6 months, it's going to feel a whole heck of a lot different than it did when you were in your 20s. We may be in a completely different spot than we were 6 months ago, even, if we're not maintaining.
Well, I think that everything feels a lot different than it was when we were in our 20s. Unless you're in your 20s.
I'm still in my 20s, luckily. So
yeah, I mean, you're still a young guy.
I can enjoy it. I can enjoy it for a year and a half.
Yeah. So, I mean, and it doesn't go downhill fast if you, especially for a guy like you who's involved in conditioning. And I know that for me, as a player and just in general, I was always a very physical type person. I really didn't see a lot of difference between 20s, 30s, and 40s. It's when I hit my 50s is when I started to see a difference.
Yeah.
And then when I hit my mid-50s is when I really saw a difference. So I really had to work a lot harder. And now that I'm almost 60, I'll be 60 this year, actually. So
the big one.
So, yeah, so I think they're all pretty big. At 50, 60, 70, 40, they're all pretty big when you're
Right.
crossing that milestone. When you look back, you think that wasn't big at all, but now you realize that where you are going is even bigger.
Sure.
So you really have to work even harder at that point, and not let up. Don't take your foot off the gas ever, to be able to keep going and be able to perform at least at a level where you're not every year falling behind.
Right.
Whereas earlier, when you're in your 20s, you don't have to do anything. When you're in your 30s, you still kind of don't have to do anything except normal stuff. Once you hit about 35, that's when you really have to start doing stuff. But it depends on who you are and whether you're extremely active physically or
Right.
not. I mean, and for me, I was just active, not just physically for golf, but lifting and moving things and things of that nature to keep my body. And it wasn't a due to try to keep my body in shape. It was just due to the fact of the work that I was involved in.
Right. Right. Yeah, and I think it's about working smarter, not always harder as we get into the 50s and 60s. So I really try to educate our players on what they're doing, why they're doing that, and just so they're efficient in the gym and they're not wasting their time. So it just makes life a lot easier if you have a plan set forth and you have some goals that you're working towards from a fitness standpoint, whether it's specifically for golf or maybe it's just losing a little bit of weight and lowering cholesterol and blood pressure. I see that a lot too, and that's just one of the positive benefits of working with someone like myself or others in the industry that we can make you healthier, but also allow you to play the game longer.
Now, do you find that some of your students overdo what you ask them to do, or they underdo what you ask them to do?
Yeah, I would say it's a mix of both. So there's obviously people that I need to stay on a little bit more and kind of push along. They're maybe not as intrinsically motivated as some of my professionals, and then some of my professionals I have to do the same thing to. I will say that I have had a few that really get into it and maybe take it to a completely different level than what I thought they would go to. So they kind of leave the realm of golf fitness training and get into like bodybuilding, which is, as we know, isn't great for golf. And if we're playing a lot, then we can have breakdowns in the golf swing and in the body. So it's important for me that I'm saying more is not always better for that player, and really try to pull back on the reins a little bit, just so. And it's really all about educating both sides of the coin.
Now, how do you find that some of your better players, your elite players? I know that we have a few at Impact Zone and I see them actually getting a little bit too bulky. And I think it's because they're trying to, and some of our juniors are like that, where they're not really getting too bulky, but I think they're overdoing it, and it's really not being very beneficial to their game. So tell us some of the things that can cause, and why it's not a good idea to do that.
Yeah, I mean, back pain is always kind of the hot topic with golf, and something that I think we'll always have to be concerned about because we're rotating at such high speeds. And especially with the professional game now, I think guys are just getting bigger and more powerful. But you're seeing that across the board and other sports too. Hockey, for example, those guys are getting faster. They're maybe smaller, but they've got the muscle to it as well. And same thing in football. Every athlete is getting a lot bigger, a lot stronger. So we really just have to mitigate what's happening in the fitness world for golfers. I just listened to Stuart McGill speak on another podcast recently, and he's really a preeminent low back pain and spinal dysfunction guru. He taught at university for many years, has lots of research papers, and he was saying that guys that are lifting like that, like you look at Brooks Koepka, who came off an injury, is pretty big right now. They're going to have potentially better careers, but they're going to be shorter careers. So you may not see these guys playing on the Champions Tour like you do now, or they may be in a lot worse shape than they could have been if they maybe had a proper fitness program with longevity in mind. But that's always the gamble. What do you want now? Do you want the highest performance, or do we want to try to spread the career out a little bit more? I think guys are going to get hot from week to week, so it's tough. And if you're not doing it, then you feel like you're falling behind everyone else. So it's a little bit of a problem that we've created, but I think it all kind of started with Tiger. Tiger's now surrounded by guys that are working just as hard as he was when he was in his prime. So we're seeing really low scores. We're seeing a lot of really low scores on every level. So I think that's maybe some of the problems that we'll run into in the future.
I always feel that it all started with Gary Player, and not Tiger. I think that Gary Player was probably one of the first original guys on tour who was really very fitness conscious. Now, I believe that the reason why Gary was because he was competing against Jack and Arnie, who were basically monsters in physical size compared to him. So in order for him to be able to keep up and to compete at that level, he really had to be at absolute tip-top shape constantly. I think that the reason why it was more recognized with Tiger was Tiger was not a little guy. He was skinny when he came out, but he was still a fairly tall guy. And then as he got a little bit more stronger and more into fitness regime, he excelled tremendously. I kind of think about what Jack might have done if Jack would have done that, what Tiger did when it came to fitness.
Right.
It might have been that maybe Tiger would have never even stood a chance of catching Jack if Jack was in that kind of condition.
Yeah, I think with most players, you have to realize where that edge is, that cliff, and kind of push them up against it, but make sure they don't fall off. So that's where you're going to get the performance, but also maybe the longevity. So it's finding a balance of both. That's going to give them what they want with the results, but also the health that they need moving forward.
Sure, I mean, it's that way in everything that, excess, there's that balance, walk the razor's edge, get as close as you can to almost excess without overdoing it. So that's true. So for players who are interested in having the opportunity to work with you, what is the best way that they can do that, and where can they find you?
Yeah, we're based out of our studio in North Naples, just right up the road from you guys at Impact Zone. So we are at 16,000 Old 41 Road, and we are in Suite 207. You can reach out by phone at 239-599-5313, or you can email me at Darin, Darin, at par4fitness.com.
And the website is?
That's par4fitness.com. PAR, the number 4, fitness.
Awesome. Well, Darin, thanks a lot for being with us today and taking the time out. I know that you're a busy guy. And congratulations on the good news that you have a son on the way, your first child.
Oh, yeah. So we have a little one coming.
Yeah, we congratulate you with that. Know that your life will change, but it's all going to change for the better.
Thank you, Bernie.
All right, take care until we meet again. Try to keep it in the short grass.
Absolutely, you too.
All right, bye-bye.
You've been listening to Breaking Par with Bernard Sheridan, the best golf interviews. Follow us on Twitter @Parbreakers and on Instagram @BSheridanGolf. Until next time, try to keep in the short grass.